You know, nobody in my family knew that what they were doing was storytelling. I mean, it was just talk. And everyone told about their mom and dad, their aunts and uncles, their brothers and sisters. I mean, that was just how we shared our lives with each other and tried to figure out how the world worked. But as a young kid, hearing all of those stories about the Dust Bowl and the Depression out in West Texas, which is where my dad had grown up, I mean, those were just as long ago and far away as any fairy tale. And in fact, it wasn't until a few years after that, actually about the time that I was considering leaving home myself, that I began to catch on about what this very first story that I ever remember our dad telling us might have been about. I mean, other than, well, mules. Because you see, my dad, Floyd, grew up in level land, Texas. And it was too. I mean, there wasn't anything you couldn't see over if you just stood up straight. And he moved there from Plainview, which gives you some idea of the geography out there. Moved from Plainview to level land with his mother, his sister, and his three brothers after his dad had died. Now, they moved on to a farm next to Uncle Jack's place, and Floyd wanted to be somewhere else. I mean, not forever, mind you, but something like that happens to you. You want to get off by yourself for a while, only he didn't have a way to go. Okay, at least not until the day that we're talking about here. Now, this day, you couldn't see any further than a dust haze out there in the near distance. Uncle Jack, he'd come over to work on their windmill because if you do know that time and place, it's just dry as dry. They needed that water bad. And Floyd, he was weeding what was left of the vegetable patch when all at once there was a dry run of thunder. It was like a freight train sitting right next to your house. The windows rattled and the wind stopped dead. And Floyd, he looked up at some bunched up clouds that he hadn't seen while he was following that hoe, and there was a crack, and the rain came down all at once, just like a huge hand slapping the ground. Of course, it stopped the same way a few minutes later, all at once. Only maybe with a sound like that freight train gone away, and it didn't do any good. I mean, it just made the air too hot and thick to swallow. Floyd made the best of it, though. He's leaning on that hoe handle, heaving that thick air up and down through his mouth when he noticed that all of the dampness, it had outlined all the cracks and hummocks there in the ground till it looked, it looked a whole lot like the knots and twists on a strong man's back when he bunches up his fist. So just that little bit of moisture looked strong enough to reach out, get a hold of that dust haze, give it a shake, and settle it. Floyd could see a long, long way, see lots of places he would like to be if he had time to go, which he didn't. Lots of places he would rather be if he had a way to go, which he surely didn't. But right then, he looked up when he heard his uncle cursing. And he looked over there just in time to see Uncle Jack throw down a wrench, start toward him. And Uncle Jack hollered out, he said, "Hoss," because he called my dad Hoss. He used to be called Hog Boy back in Plainview when his dad was alive and they could still afford to raise hogs, but Jack called him Hoss. "I want you to go fetch my boy Whistle for me. I'm going to need his help. I don't want to be all day working on this windmill." Now, you got to know, my dad was about 10 at the time, and there were a couple of ways he traveled there in West Texas. One was on his feet, of course, but Jack's was a half-hour walk, and he wanted his boy Whistle soon. Another way he traveled was on the back of a plow horse, and I don't know if you've had anything to do with them, but You're right, almost as slow as walking. But Jack, he looked around the yard and he caught sight of the mules over there in the corral, and he said, Hoss, why don't you take old Red? Now, old Red looked like he had been slapped together out of red river clay. He was lumpy, he was dirty, he was 19 hands high. He was a monster. Floyd had never ridden anything that big, much less bridled it. But by that time, Jack had crawled back underneath that windmill, kind of muttering to himself. So Floyd headed for the corral. He grabbed a rope off the barn wall as he walked by. Then he walked right up to that big mule, took that rope, slung it over Red's high neck, made a little slip knot so it would hold. And he led that mule on back to the yard. The mule followed him suspiciously. And on the way back, he grabbed the bridle off the wall. And then he went and he tied Red to this old wheelless wagon they had there in the yard, used it as a feed trough, filled it with hay and oats and whatnot. Tied him to that wheelless wagon, looped the bridle over his arm so he'd have it. And then he grabbed that rope with both hands and he pulled Red's head down, held it down with one. Then he tried to put the bridle on with the other while Red slowly raised his head up out of reach. So Floyd, he grabbed that rope and he pulled Red's head down, held it down with one. Then he quickly tried to put the bridle on with the other while Red quickly raised his head up out of reach. He did that dance 2 or 3 more times before Floyd called a breather. Hands on knees, head down. Now he was standing like that when he saw a shadow come up beside old Red. Shadow was followed by his uncle's work boots, so he straightened up. Uncle Jack looked at Floyd, glanced over at the mule, looked back at Floyd, and he grinned. Now, Floyd liked his uncle, but he didn't always like it when he grinned. I mean, when Jack used to come over to Plainview, he and Floyd's dad just grinned all the time. He couldn't trust neither of them very far when they did. And Jack glanced at that mule back at Floyd and he said, Hoss, you got to hurry. Here's what you do. Hold on to that bridle like they got there. And in a minute, get up on that wagon. All right. Get a hold of Red's ear. Then bite down hard on it, jump off. Floyd looked at his uncle real hard just to make sure he was sober. See, Jack had been by old man Clark's place on the way there. Clark was known for a couple of things. He's known for what he owed people and what he brewed in his storm cellar, but it didn't matter. I mean, Jack grinned, drunk or sober, and he was not the kind of man that expected to have to repeat himself. And so when he started to speak again, holding onto that bridle, Floyd climbed up on that wagon, took a hold of Red's big, long, kind of hairy ear, bit down hard on it, and that ear tasted bad. And when he jumped, he hit the ground hard, but old Red's head came down. Bridle went on. Floyd and Jack grinned at each other. Hoss, I don't want to be all day. So Floyd skinnied up that wagon, slipped onto the mule's back while his uncle loosed the rope, and he grabbed those reins, pointed that mule in the right direction, and they were gone. And in the weeks following that, Floyd only had to jump off of that wagon with a mule ear in his mouth 2 or 3 more times before he and the mule came to an agreement. I mean, whenever Floyd would show up, a mule come right across, head down, ready for that bridle, and he always went the direction that Floyd would point him in. But being a mule, old Red always reserved the right to choose the distance. It took my dad far and wide, friends. I mean, just took him far and wide. And it wasn't until a good number of years after I had left home, as I was finally beginning to write down all of those stories that I'd heard growing up, that I realized that sometimes the stories didn't quite feel right. I mean, the language didn't hum like it did at the kitchen table until I finally began to speak them again, which actually explains a lot of my life's trajectory. Talk, and frankly, you tell stories for a living, it's smart to move from time to time. Yeah. Thanks for listening.